Hello friends, today I want to try something a little bit different, and so I'm going to talk about 5 quick tips to accelerate your tech career growth in software engineering. The examples I have are going to be based off web development, so it's going to be pertaining to the tech stack that's more front-end related, but it should be generically applied everywhere else. So the first one I want to talk about is type of testing, right? So you know how we usually write unit tests, integration tests, smoke tests, end-to-end tests with our code usually. But what most people fail to do is that um, their tests are very like non-deterministic. So like if a test breaks out of nowhere once in a blue moon it breaks, it's very frustrating and people don't usually know how to fix those and they just blame it on either the test infra or it could be the testing code itself. So one way to help with that is try to write tests in a more deterministic way. So an example of that could be like if you have a test that's relying on, say, timers, right? In JavaScript, like if you say you set timeout and you're relying that after X amount of seconds, we should see this new UI or something, you're testing for that. Now, that is going to be tricky because if you use test frameworks enough, in certain test frameworks, you can override that timer and on different, CIs and they have different machines as well, the timer might be funky. And when you do that, it's not very reliable. So one way to combat that is maybe try to convert the function that you're testing into a more async await path. So then you can just uh, basically just await for the operation to finish instead of having to wait for a arbitrary timer that's OS dependent, right? The second thing is also related to testing, but this time we're talking about performance of testing. So usually tests are really fast to run, like less than a second or so for your small tests. But if you are working big tech, right, you have probably like thousands, tens of thousands of tests, and those can add up. And like you getting your code to pass those tests in, say, CI and stuff, it's going to take a long time. You probably have a lot of those tests like accumulating, especially when they're very complicated. And so one way to do that is figure out if you can make a certain test that's very, you know, loads very slowly, make it somehow faster. And one way to do that is get rid of all the timing related stuff. And the other way, just directly delete tests or refactor tests into smaller form factors so that they don't take us much time. And so one really good example is related to animations. And so if you work in a company that has a lot of components that use a lot of animations, like for example, for this component to render into this other component, you need to wait, say, 5 seconds of animation. And that's 5 seconds additional time that needs to be added to the entire test suite runtime. And so one way I think that was really smart that someone did at my previous company was that in the testing environment, when we see the testing environment, we just directly set all the timer speeds for the animations to either 0 or just remove it completely. Because in testing, we don't really care about the animations and the UI. That sort of animated UI changes, that's more for the user. That's more perspective wise, but it's not very like functionally needed in the testing most of the time. And so we just opt to take those out, and it sped up the whole test suite significantly. And it also reduces the amount of flakiness in the test suite. The third one is a pretty underrated one, I think. I think everyone takes it for granted, but it's related to linting. And so if you work on front end web development, you'll probably know about ESLint, for example. ESLint is very powerful because it catches simple code syntax mistakes as well as framework level mistakes, depending on if you have the rules enabled or not. It catches that before you even commit a code review, right? But if your team do not have linting set up, then it is a great opportunity for you to go ahead and set up because it's very, very easy. Now, if you do have that set up, right, the second part you can do is figure out if there are any public rules that you can enable to improve the productivity of your team. Whether that be like new rules that can sort of solve issues that your teammates have been, headbutting against the wall about or stuff like that. And the third part, which is a very interesting part, I think not a lot of people do, it's like a unique skill set, is actually writing custom lint rules. I have done this a lot and it's very helpful and people always appreciate it. So basically, let's say you're in a product infra team, like a UI foundation team that's responsible for building like all the UI building blocks for your team, for your company. And all the other adjacent teams across the company uses your components. Now, how do you make sure that everyone across the company is using your components so then everyone is sort of like cohesive, right? So like say, how can I prevent someone using the native button HTML, but instead uses our button component for our team? You can write a lint rule for that, right? And you can just basically say for every call, if I find any HTML that's marked as button, warn or gave an error to the user that, hey, you should probably be using our infra component. So that's where it comes in handy. There's a lot of other use cases you can dig deeper, but there's a great room of opportunity that if you learn how to use it correctly, it can be very useful for the amount of time that you spend on it. The fourth tip I want to go into is related to linting, but it takes it a step further. It's called Codemods. So if you like find and replace, it's basically find and replace on steroids with a lot more customizations. Codemods are extremely beneficial when you are working on large scale migrations. So let's say I want to migrate this code base and rewrite every function that matches this pattern into another way, or migrate this API call into another sort of format. But you can do that with find and replace. You should consider using Codemods. There are a lot of tools available for you, JS Code Shift, and then you have to basically, it takes the same ideology from linting, where it's based on the abstract syntax tree, right? And so once you learn how that works and figure out the parsers that you need for it and figure out how to write the actual code to do the transformations, it's a win-win, right? And I've seen people get promotions out of this a lot of times. This is how you can take something as boring as a migration and make it a more exciting engineering initiative and get more out of it, right? Because you're saving not just your time, but you're saving everyone's time who's working on the migration. Now, the fifth tip is pretty obvious, but I just want to dwell on a little bit. It's making reusable components. So the reason why I say I want to be careful about this is it's good if from the start, it's always good if from the start you can build like say open source library where everyone can use it, even in your company or outside, right? That's like the dream. But that's usually not possible because of the time, because you don't know what the use cases for that level of scope is. Usually you are given a internal like team level, right, requirements and you're building a product to fit that requirement. And that is completely okay to do. But what I think a lot of people mess up on is that they only focus on the thing that's in front of them, but they never try to explore a different architecture, or like at least have the intent to scale it beyond that level in the future. A lot of people, I think, just focus on delivering the product, execute it for their team, and then they're done. They have no intentions to move it further along the process. So I would like to challenge people who are looking for fast career growth is to, yes, execute at the team level first, but have the intent to think if there's a potential to scale that component beyond just the team, maybe to your whole organization, to the whole company, and eventually to maybe even open sourcing it, right? There's no like bad things that can come out of it. This is one of the things that actually was very important for my first promotion. And that was working on something open source and then using it internally inside the company. And then I actually have a post about that on my own website. If you're interested, I can link it below in the description. But yeah, I think going forward, I'm going to try different content formats because I do like talking about career advices, giving tips on career growth and stuff like that, and while also doing more educational oriented content that's based on a wider audience. So if you want to see more content like this, please comment down below. I'm trying to cater to my audience, right, as well. So yeah, so if you like this type of content, please like and subscribe, and or give me more ideas down below in the comments. Cool. Thanks.